Hi, Samantha Tonge, Labrakeeter Marketing again with my latest expert interview with people who either work in marketing or are in some way related to marketing. And today I have someone who's got a very similar background to me, I guess, Nicky Parker. So over to you, Nicky. Can you explain a bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I'm Nicky Parker and I run Bang Consulting, and we are in the process of migrating from being a fully outsourced marketing agency to delivering in-depth marketing consultancy to help support businesses and correct where they're going wrong with their marketing. So usually it starts with quite a deep dive audit. We literally lift every stone and find out what's crawling out from underneath. We present back to the board, we tell them what our findings are, we give them some recommendations, and then we talk through, whether they want our support or whether they want to carry on with the blueprint and do it themselves.
Okay. So people call you in, I guess, because they know something's not working quite right.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. It might be, and I find this quite a lot actually with businesses, that they have grown in spite of themselves, for want of a better way of putting it. So they've grown the business, but it is very much by accident that they have just been in the right place at the right time and done the right thing. Quite a lot of the clients that we have don't really have a good handle on what marketing is and what marketing they should be doing for their business. So I think that perhaps what's happened is they get to a point where growth has stagnated, or things aren't starting to add up any longer. The marketing budget is being spent, but they're not really seeing a return on it. They're not really sure what they should be measuring to get a return on it, all that sort of stuff, really.
Okay, what would you say are the most common problems that you see marketers or companies making, most common mistakes companies are making with their marketing?
I think the overriding issue that they all have is to do with the customer. They haven't got their customer profiles bottomed out. They don't understand their customer. They don't use their customer's language. They talk at their customer, not to their customer. So, then they do a myriad of very strange things because they don't know where their customer is. There is no point in advertising on the radio if your customers don't listen to the radio. There is no point in advertising in the Mail on Sunday if your customers don't read the Mail on Sunday. And those are sort of two that sound like, well, we wouldn't do either of those things, but it's true whatever you do. Yeah. There's no point in you being on TikTok just because it's the latest trend.
Yeah.
If your customers don't look at TikTok, that's a waste of time. I think what happens is that you get two camps. You get we've always done it that way. So there's those, like, okay, but the world has moved on. Or you get the others where there are people within the organisation that are after the next shiny, and they keep going off on all these tangents, doing things that, that they're a waste of time and money for them. And then I guess so that's definitely the biggest issue. And then there's also that element of not appreciating that you need to give something time. It's no good doing it and 2 days later, we tried that and that didn't work. Well, hold on a moment, you haven't actually given it enough time. And then when you start talking to them about, well, how long's your sales cycle? What do you mean? Well, how long does it take from when you first talk to a prospect for them to become a customer? Well, 6 months. Okay, so how can you measure in 2 or 3 days whether something has worked or not? You haven't even given it, a couple of months. And have you moved them down the sales cycle? So it is really about that. And if they attached their marketing to the sales cycle, they would find it more effective. So understanding that the very first time a prospective customer hears about you and sees you, they're not going to want war and peace from you. They're going to want something light touch, something snackable, if you like. So we're going from the afternoon snack, and we're building up to the full banquet as we get closer to the sale. I mean, that's probably more true in B2B than it is in B2C. But even in B2C, you know, I mean, it depends on, you know, the ticket item. You know, there's obviously a much quicker buying process between, do you want a Mars bar when you go to the petrol station and decide you're hungry, versus do you want that new Audi S7?
Yes.
You know, the cost is very different, and therefore the decision-making process is that much different. And it's about understanding that, and understanding what the customer will want in each part of the journey to move them to the next part of the journey.
That's interesting. This is something I come across a lot in the sort of industries that I work with, the sort of technical type industries, where, especially if the business owner is a very technical person, you know, they might have been started, you know, they've got this great product that was started by an engineer, and the way they think, oh well, customers need all of the information at once, rather than, as you say, piecemeal, or as, you know, the right amount of information depending on where they are in the journey. And I
think then what happens is they disappear down a technical rabbit hole as well. Like, well, I need to give them all this technical information. Well, hold on a moment. The customer isn't technical. The customer doesn't do what you do, doesn't understand that. They're buying your expertise. You don't need to wow them with your knowledge and skill set. What they want is a solution to their problem, and they want to be reassured that you know what the right solution to their problem is, not blinding them with science, because then the customer ends up feeling stupid because they don't understand, and they don't want to admit they don't understand. So then they walk away because they're like, I don't have any confidence in this company because I don't think I'm going to understand them. And therefore I'm sure they get what I have as a problem or what I need.
Yes. Yeah. And then there's I find the other problem as well is, if they're marketing to fellow technical people, they forget even technical people, they only have so much time. They're bombarded with messages, and you know, you've got to grab their interest before they want all this technical information, even if at some point in the buying process they do. Yeah. So and speaking, like you said, something that resonated with me, what you just said as well, is speaking the customer's language. So many tech companies are particularly bad for this, is using their own terminology, not what a customer would be searching for. Even some I've seen websites that are organized by their own internal product codes.
What's that?
Which only they understand.
600, 700. What the hell is the okie dokie anything?
Exactly. That's interesting. And did you ever find that I think you kind of touched on this with there's some people that are not giving it enough time. Are you finding people are calling you in because they think there's a problem in the marketing, but actually it's a problem in a different part of the business that's actually the core issue?
That happens a lot. So there probably are things, and there are always things that need to be fixed with the marketing. But when you start talking to people, so we always interview all of the board, and then we interview all of the marketing team, and then we interview all the other stakeholders that are connected with marketing. So sales, biz dev, you know, whatever it is, dependent on the business. So I've just done something for a retail business. So obviously you want to talk to store managers as well and understand them. So then other stuff kind of falls out of there. You know, it might be things that people don't see as connected with marketing, but it is really, really important. So credit control, for example, how you tell somebody that they owe you the money is, you know, can be very polite and friendly, or it can be exceptionally rude. And it's also about giving, you know, being realistic. You know, once somebody hasn't paid the bill, you don't cut them off the day after they haven't paid the bill. So it's about kind of thinking what is a reasonable process, but it's all about that communication and ensuring that the whole business communicates in the same way. So sometimes there's a disconnect between, you know, well, we come across as friendly and customer focused, etc., etc. And then you start to look at the various things and you go, well, you might be in that bit, but in that bit, I wouldn't call that very customer focused. So it's about making sure that the whole thing joins up really, and sometimes it just doesn't.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And do you come across the relationship between sales and marketing being an issue a lot? Is that not something you see very often?
Well, it's a bit of a standing joke for us, actually, because I work really closely with a guy who is ex big ticket IT sales.
Okay.
And he comes in and he does customer interviewing, and he helps with pricing, sales and business development, mentoring, account management training, that sort of thing. And we always laugh about the fact that that sales and marketing don't normally, but we do play nicely in the sandpit together kind of thing, is the expression I tend to use. But yes, you're right that, you know, it is quite common that sales think it's marketing and marketing think it's sales. You know, marketing's concept is that sales sell the dream, and then nobody can fulfill that dream because you've just sold them whatever the customer wants to buy. Whereas sales think all that marketing do is, you know, the colouring in, you know, they make the presentation look pretty and they order the branded pens and mugs, etc., which is a bit of a standing joke between the two of us. However, underneath it all, we both very much respect what each other does.
Yeah.
But I would say in a lot of organisations, there is quite a lot of tension between sales and marketing. And I think it can be so easily resolved. You know, if they just sat down together and talked about, okay, sales guys, what do you need to help you do your job better? And, you know, bringing out that knowledge from the sales team, tell us everything you're learning. Customer, what are the objections the customer are giving you? Why isn't the customer buying? What's their concern? You know, sometimes they go, well, they don't do it in green. Let's unpick why that might be, or what the problem is with that. So it's just a conversation thing, and I think that sometimes the tensions just can get bigger and bigger and bigger, and everyone's not going, hold on, let's just switch here, let's refocus and see if we can rethink this.
Yeah, so certainly when I've been client side, building up that relationship with sales was so important. And sometimes you know, you have a predecessor who didn't do that, and you kind of
you're starting from the back foot. Yeah.
I think it's important to like go on sales visits with them and that kind of thing. And like you say, they know things that the customers, the issues that the customers have that you might not be aware of. You know, stuff's coming from corporate head office. Because you know the top bods think this is the message, what the message should be, and then you find out actually sales guys on the ground have this information that kind of changes everything.
And that really neatly brings you on to data, which is the other problem, isn't it? So you've got that whole thing about, well, where is all that information going? And quite often it's on bits of paper in the back of salesmen's cars or in their briefcase, or it's on somebody's desk or something, you know, like, well, you know, you need to pull that information together. The most expensive CRM system is what's
I think we might have lost Nicky. Right. I'll stop recording in a minute. Hopefully she'll be back. Oh, you're back.
I am.
You disappeared for a bit there.
Oh, sorry.
No, it might be my end. I better check. While I ask you the next question, I'm also going to just double check my internet connection. So yes, data. You're talking about. Sorry, missed what you're talking about with the CRM system.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be, and I mean, there are CRMs that are free and there are CRMs that are incredibly expensive, and you know, it's not about having the most expensive, most complicated CRM system. Actually, I would argue the simpler it is, the better it is, because it's more likely that people will use it then. Whereas if you've got, you know, 500,000 fields in it, everyone's going to go, oh, I haven't got time to fill that in, so they don't fill any of it in. Whereas it, you know, if you have a few fields and perhaps a free flow box, it is better. The trouble with free flow, of course, is it requires more analysis, but you've got to somehow be able to capture this stuff, because otherwise nobody's like, well, hold on a moment, we still know nothing about the customer. Well, you do, but it's just that nobody's pulling it all together.
Yeah, and it's
so looking at habits and things, you know, what are the most popular items? What are the things that are languishing on the shelf? Why are they languishing on the shelf? Have you tried giving them a bit of love to see if you can get them reignited in people's interest? Or is it just something that nobody wants anymore? And if it is, then what's it doing on the shelf? Get rid of it and find something that they do want. And I do find that quite strange, that whole, people don't seem to, when they sell any kind of product, people don't seem to review that regularly to look at what are people's buying habits telling us.
That's a scary thought.
Where the FMCG world are really, really strong. You know, you see them constantly. I mean, you know, you and I are both classically marketing trained, so we get that. But that whole Boston box thing about moving the products around and refreshing the product so that it continues to be your cash cow kind of thing. And I think, you know, you don't need to be classically marketing trained to understand that your best product is the one that you need to be thinking of variations of, or what can you do to keep it fresh and in people's minds, which is why we've moved from washing powder many years ago to the capsules and liquid and goodness knows what else washing liquid things we've got now, because there isn't an alternative to that. So that's how they keep it fresh.
Yeah. And thinking about that brings to mind an issue I had. Are they marketing things? Sometimes the real issue with a product that's not moving, they're pricing it wrong in either direction.
Yeah. So, and I think that's really interesting, because that kind of also comes along with brand perception, doesn't it? That so if you tell everybody you're a high-end business, but when you look at them, they come across as an Aldi or a Lidl, which are fantastic brands, but they're positioned in a specific place in the market. You know, your disconnect between luxury brand and the way you show up is so far apart that you aren't going to get the customer to buy into it, because they're like, well, I'm expecting a high-end experience, a Harrods experience, or if we're using supermarkets, a Waitrose or a Marks and Spencer's experience, but you're showing up like your Lidl or Aldi. So who are you? So you're right, you know, if you're pricing too low and you're trying to set yourself as a premium product, then people start to feel anxious about it. But equally, if you're saying this is a cost-effective solution and your price is sky high, we're like, well, it doesn't feel very cost-effective to me. It feels like a lot of money. I mean, there's an argument to say, and I know that Alex, if he was here, who is the sales guy that I work with, he would say that the reason that they're reticent is that you haven't sold the value. And I would agree with that, but equally, there is only so much elasticity in the price, and it's what the market will bear. So it's about being confident about that, which, you know, I mean, I'm not a fan of these huge marketing plans that are like, you know, a couple of inches thick and quite useful for holding the door open, and that's about it. So I'm not keen on getting clients to disappear too much down the rabbit hole of researching and analysing every single thing. I don't think it needs to be that deep. But having said that, over the course of time, I would actively encourage them to have an understanding of what their competitors are doing, so that they know whether their pricing and their approach is right for the market or not. But largely, it's what their own customers are saying that is the key. Yes.
I guess it comes back to having that data. Because sometimes price is a community, like you said, you know, part of the price is communication as well as, you know, how much money's coming in, if you can, if you're making a profit or not. Yeah, that's interesting, and that's an issue in engineering as well, and technical products, where they've got they're selling something that's highly engineered and will often saves the customer thousands and thousands of pounds, but they're selling it for like 30 quid, because although it's well engineered, it's cheap to manufacture. Yes, but you're saying something about the product by selling it so cheap.
Yeah.
Yes,
and I think there's that whole thing about not valuing the expertise. Yes. I used to work with an IT support company, and I always used to say to the MD, if you're one of your engineers walked into one of your customers, took a piece of chewing gum out of his mouth and put it in the server and got the IT back up and running, the customer would be happy. And he said, no, they wouldn't. I said, yes, they would. And the reason for that is they don't care what you do, as long as their IT works. What they're paying for is he knows where to put the piece of chewing gum. Not that I'm suggesting they did that, but you know what I mean? It is that simple.
Yeah.
It's not about necessarily making it complex. It's about having the knowledge and experience and understanding to know how to fix it. It's not what you did to fix it. Sometimes it's literally, the cable's come loose, put that back in. Oh, look at that, everything's working again.
Yeah, exactly. That it's I guess it comes back to, I guess we might both have been taught this one in Chartered Institute of Marketing, the levels of the product, and the core product is actually what you solve for the customer at the end of the day, which might be in B2C, sometimes that's purely emotional in reality, but in B2B it's usually, your example, the server's back up and running. I can do my work. It's not XYZ cable was installed. They don't care.
No. And that in the B2B world is more common because they forget that people still buy on emotion. It is still a real person that is doing the buying. Yes. And they do still go through that series of emotions about, if I choose this company, what's the effect going to be on me? If I've got it wrong and they cock it up, that's my job on the line or my reputation on the line. Yeah. So there is that level of anxiety. So all of that understanding is just as applicable in the business to business world as it is in the consumer world.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. It's the and quite often it's unfortunate in a way, but it works. It's often you're talking to them about the negative emotions that they're feeling, that you can then give them that confidence that they need. Things going to work.
Yeah. The pain, and then how to move away from pain.
Yes, exactly. The challenger sale, as they call it. Yeah.
And then the whole new thing, which is that horrible phrase that we learn, post-purchase dissonance, but that whole thing about being afraid of, oh my God, did I make the right decision? It's a bit like the car is always the one, isn't it? You've chosen your car, you've signed on the dotted line, you've paid your deposit, then they tell you, well, I would say 3 to 4 weeks, but at the moment, if you bought a brand new car, apparently it's 18 months at the moment. Gosh. But anyway, so I know, nightmare, but you've decided you want to buy a car, you've agreed to it, and then you're like, oh my God, that was an awful lot of money, have I made the right decision? And then you start to see them on the road everywhere, and you're like, oh my God, they're really common, do I want one of those? And then you're like, are they okay? And then you're like, should I go and talk to somebody who's got one of those? All of that stuff goes on. So the car company who keeps in touch with you, who sends you a little photo to say, here's your car being cleaned at the moment or whatever, all of that stuff, that's why so many car companies make a big drama out of it when you rock up to take your car away, the bow, the flowers, the clean, the look here, let me show you round it, we've put some petrol in it, all of those things. That's all to reassure you haven't made a mistake. And that's why the good ones, the car salesman then phones you 3 or 4 weeks later to make sure you're still okay, that you've worked out how everything works, all of that stuff. And that's, that's a lesson that probably most of us could learn in a service or a product world, about how are you supporting your customer to reassure them that they've made the right decision. Even with small items, it might be little mini videos about how to get the most out of it. If you've bought some paint, this is different ways that you can apply your paint. This is what you need to do to clean your brush to make sure that you can use it again. It doesn't matter what it is. Most things would benefit from a bit of reassurance of, I've done a good job here, I've chosen the right company and the right product or service.
Yeah, so I guess that's a bit of the customer journey that a lot of marketers forget about. Do you find that's quite common when you're going into places that they've completely forgotten a bit of the customer journey that's actually really important to keep in touch?
Well, and it's back to that same old thing about, it's cheaper to continue to sell to your existing customer than it is to win a new customer. And also it's about how to move them from being a one-time customer to a repeat customer to a loyal customer to becoming an advocate and a raving fan for you. And that whole thing, how many times have we both heard my customer's leaving and they're going somewhere else? Why? Well, because they wanted to buy so-and-so, and so they've gone to one of our competitors. But we do that. Did you ever tell them that you did that?
Yes.
Well, no. Okay, well then how would they know that? So they don't market to them afterwards. And this isn't all about buy our stuff, buy our staff. This is about a continuing dialogue that marketing are just as responsible for as sales. And if it's done in the right way, we'll continue to reassure the customer. But equally, I have to say I'm a huge fan of the whole how you deal with it when it goes wrong too, because that is the way you change the customer from a disgruntled customer to that raving fan. If you handle that well, if you dilute the heat in the argument, you resolve the problem quickly and easily, you've got the meeting out of your hand, really. Especially if you acknowledge, that's gone wrong, we're really sorry, that shouldn't have happened, this is what we're going to do to resolve that problem. It's easy to fix usually. And if it isn't, well, we are all human, but again, it's okay, what can we do to fix this problem?
Yes, and while I wouldn't suggest that anyone deliberately causes problems for their customers, funnily enough, someone who's had an issue that has been fixed by a company often then is a much bigger fan of the company they would have been if nothing had gone wrong in the first place.
Very much so. When you've got that, I'm not happy with this, oh crikey, no, I can see why you wouldn't be, let's see how we can solve that, is so much better than we haven't done anything wrong, it's not our problem. You just take the heat out of it if you apologize or if you recognize that there's an issue straight away. That's huge. Complaints management, it's something that I think a lot of companies overlook, especially if they were quite small and it was really easy to deal with in an informal way, but they've become this big corporation and they've lost track of how to deal with unhappy customers. That's about building a process, which doesn't sound very interesting or sexy, and it isn't, but it super is when it goes wrong, because you've got that consistency. And that's key, so that they're always dealt with in the same way, not out on the shop floor suddenly takes it into his head to deal with something differently because he's answered the phone one Friday afternoon, and then you've got all hell breaking loose kind of thing. If it's always dealt with in the same way, you've got that level of consistency. Otherwise, a customer could talk to another customer and go, well, that happened to me and so happened. And then the first customer's like, well, that didn't happen for me.
And that's where, and I guess that's where you start to get some serious reputation damage potentially if you're not handling that correctly. So is there anything else we haven't covered, do you think, that's a common issue that marketers and business owners or senior management need to think about in terms of getting their marketing right, or where they might be going wrong?
I think have a plan for absolute certainty. As I said, I don't think it needs to be War and Peace. Quite frankly, you know, a couple of spreadsheets will do the job. You know, bit of a PowerPoint presentation sort of thing in terms of where you want to go with the business, what your strategy is, and then perhaps how you might get there. But you know, it doesn't have to be complicated, but you do need a plan, and you need a communications plan as well. So what are you going to talk about all the time? Because I find so often that when I say to clients, okay, are you blogging, are you sending emails, are you doing social? No. Okay, why aren't you doing that? Well, I don't really know what to talk about. Well, the reason you don't know what to talk about is because you haven't got a plan. So if I suddenly said to you, write about something, you'd be like, oh my God, what am I going to write about? But if I said to you, right, next month we're going to talk about, I don't know, post-purchase dissonance or something, you'd already be thinking about that. So when I said to you, okay, where are you at with that now? You go, yeah, I've kind of 3/4 written it in my head, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I went to a company a couple of years ago, and I said, can you show me your comms plan? And she said, no. And I said, how are you deciding what to talk about then? Well, on a Monday morning, we all sit together and say, what should we talk about this week? And I'm like, right, okay. And how have you tied that in with, you know, what you're selling and where you want to get to with the business? Oh, well, I didn't really think about that. I didn't even know that we needed to do that. Right, okay, yeah, no, that is quite key, actually. So, you know, that's why it doesn't happen. And that's why, you know, you look at companies' social media and it all seems so disjointed. 1 minute they're talking about product, then they're talking about a result, then they're talking about something else. You know, it's because it just hasn't been thought through. And it's not, it doesn't have to be super difficult. Again, that can be a spreadsheet, but it's just okay, we're talking about tires this month, so everything needs to be about tires or whatever it is.
Yeah, and like you say, it all ties into the overall business goals. I've had quite a few clients that I've sat down with and gone, okay, let's start, what are your objectives? Oh, I don't know. Well, if you don't know what you want to achieve, I can't help you.
Or they go, well, I just need more leads. It's
how many more?
Quite as straightforward as that. And I don't really want you to see marketing as like a lead generation sausage making machine, because that isn't really what it is. You know, if we do generate leads, that's sometimes a coincidence or a byproduct of doing the marketing well, and also appreciating the difference between trying to do stuff to promote activity here and now versus doing brand building, and understanding the difference between those two.
Absolutely.
And the consequences of both of those. If a company is obsessed with building their brand out, they cannot expect instant results in terms of sales, because that's a long-term plan. Whereas I've bought these things cheap and I want to get them out, that's a whole different message set.
Yes, absolutely. And you need to do both. You need to think about the long term and the short term. And one thing that often comes up is, I can't remember the company that bought them out, but someone bought Heinz, and they decided that everyone knows the name Heinz, so we don't need to do any brand awareness campaigns, just lead generation stuff. And it took 3 years, but they really damaged the value of the Heinz brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yet you're right, you know, if you say tomato sauce, we all think ketchup, you can see the bottle, you know, etc., etc. Baked beans, Heinz, you know, we all think about specific products, we totally associate with them. But you're right, I mean, at the end of the day, if you didn't need to advertise, why do Coca-Cola always advertise at Christmas? And they are probably one of the most well-known brands wherever you go in the world. That red and white Coca-Cola brand is everywhere. But They still advertise, because when you go to the supermarket to buy your Christmas drinks, you're going to put Coke in the trolley rather than Pepsi or whatever else it might be.
Yeah, yeah, it's keeping it in people's minds all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that as a common mistake as well. It's just think of it in terms of lead generation. And like you say, sometimes I have run brand building campaigns that have by accident turned into leads, which is
Yes.
a happy accident. But
Yes.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Brilliant. Okay, I think that's a lot of really good food for thought for a lot of marketers out there, and also businesses who have marketing teams that maybe they think aren't performing, even if it turns out it's an issue elsewhere in the business. So yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for all that information.
No problem.
Do you currently, I always ask this at the end, do you currently have anything to plug?
No, not really. I don't think so. No.
Just if you guys out there have an issue with marketing, you want someone to come in and look, I guess Nicky's your person.
Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Nicky. I will put your links and information when this gets published. And yeah, thank you for watching again, guys.
Thank you very much.